Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, February the 26th, 2024. And this is a week that runs through until Sunday, March the 3rd, 2024. So before I do anything, I want to just go over the structure of this video. I'm going to start off by looking at the overall planetary picture, what the planets are doing over the course of a week, and I'm going to run through the big events as I see it, sort of blow by blow account, from Monday through to Sunday, about what the main astrological events of a week are. I do not do sign forecasts for the week. At the moment my focus is on doing daily sign forecasts. So if you want to know what's going on from a sign point of view, one of the 12 signs, look at my daily forecasts. Having looked at the overall picture, I'm going to consider some famous people who may be impacted by what's going on today. What's going on this week. I'm particularly focusing on a big conjunction between the Sun, Mercury and Saturn, which sort of takes place on Wednesday. I think that's far and away the biggest event of a week. And so, I'm going to look at who might be affected by this big conjunction. So that explains some of the people in the thumbnail of this video. You've got Keir Starmer, the British politician, leader of the opposition, who supposedly at the next election is going to be prime minister. He's about to be elected prime minister. At least that's what everyone says. Another person affected may be Sam Bankman-Fried, of FTX fame or infamy. That big crypto collapse which happened, a long time ago now. Was it the end of 2022? Prince Harry, Prince Harry was impacted by the full moon last week. But I'd want to talk a bit about Prince Harry because I did have some ideas about how that full moon might impact him. Then you can see there's a British Admiral, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, Chief of the Defence Staff. I don't know his time of birth, but I've looked at his horoscope of the day he was born. Does seem to be some stuff going on. This conjunction involving Saturn may impact him. He is the head of the British Armed Forces. So what impacts him might also impact Britain's military and how Britain sees itself, at least from a military perspective. So I thought I'd look at that. I know we'll be looking at some other people. But having done that, I will be looking at the I Ching. Now, I must remind you that that is completely optional. If you do not want your I Ching read, then you don't have to look at the section of this video which covers the I Ching. You can reach for I Ching and then you can just stop watching. Because consulting an oracle is a voluntary thing. It can't be something that's forced upon you. You have got to know what you're doing. You've got to say, yes, I want to see what the oracle has to say. So just bear that in mind. And when you come to the I Ching segment and you don't want me to discuss it, you don't want to hear what I have to say, then just stop watching the video. And that means that what I say has no impact on you because the whole thing is focused on people who are actually watching the segment. People who've made the decision to watch the I Ching segment. Okay, so yes, I should firstly say, before I look at today's astrology, I should say that the I Ching segment is divided up into 4 sections. A general section, money, career and business, and finally relationships. Okay, so let's start off by considering the day's astrology. So the chart here is the start positions. The beginning of the week from the perspective of New York, sort of midnight Monday, New York. Uh, I choose New York because it's sort of it's I don't know. It seems to be a sort of good general place to start. It's sort of eastern United States. It's relatively close to Europe. So I mean, there's no reason why it has to be New York. It could be Sydney, Australia, or it could be anywhere else. But I've just decided to go for New York. New York. It doesn't have any sort of special significance. So those are the start positions. So on Monday, um, February the 26th, the main aspect is probably a semi-square between Venus and Neptune. There is Venus, 1148 Aquarius. There is Neptune, 2636 Pisces. Now, Venus-Neptune semi-square may be about relationships and how we see other people. And it can be quite a confusing influence. Venus is how we relate and how we understand other people. And when it's semi-square Neptune, there's a certain risk that we make mistakes. We might draw the wrong conclusions. Also, with Venus-Neptune aspects, there's a certain sense of fantasy to it. We can delude ourselves. We can actually go off on flights of fantasy, perhaps thinking about relationships. We could have flights of fantasy about money as well, because Venus is the planet of money. And so if Venus is semi-square Neptune, we just might get the wrong idea about money. So we do have to be a bit careful about that. And at the same time on Monday, the Sun is quintile Uranus. So there's the Sun, and it's Sun in Uranus. They're 72 degrees apart. Now, 72 degrees, that is 1/5 of the circle. It is what we are trying to create. It's a style we are trying to develop. And so with Sun quintile Uranus, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be making a real effort to be rebels. That's the thing to be, to having a rebellious style. People are going to make a special effort to be different, to say, to maybe just to be contrary for the sake of it. But I must emphasize, this is about style. It's not about substance. So just because you see someone being rebellious, being contrary, it doesn't mean that they're really like that. They just feel that they have to do it in order to express individuality. But I suppose if everyone is rebelling in a particular way, then it's not really individuality at all. It's just sort of rebellion for the sake of rebellion. But yeah, people are going to try to be different. But it's probably skin deep. Moving on to Tuesday, you can see that Mars starts a week at 9:59 Aquarius. Then it moves to a square of Jupiter. So Tuesday does see Mars square Jupiter. Mars square Jupiter can be a bit frenetic, wanting action. So Tuesday people are going to want action, and they may just cause chaos for the sake of it. Just too much energy. And I think we have to be careful if we feel impatient, we want things to be done. Our obsession with getting things done may lead to actually nothing being done at all. Just a lot of noise. So do bear that in mind. Probably the busiest day, in theory, is Wednesday. Now, Wednesday sees a semi-square between Mars and Neptune. So Mars is about how we assert ourselves. Neptune is about fantasies, delusions, perhaps. So some of us might really try hard to assert ourselves, but in a way that is just completely useless. It's just completely counterproductive. And we may sort of chase the wrong things, put a lot of energy into something, and it's all for nothing. So do bear that in mind. And in certain cases with Mars semi-square Neptune, we may get involved in things which are not very savoury. It sounds fun, exciting, attractive. It kind of sounds edgy, but we'd be taking a risk. So if something sounds exciting, maybe it should be avoided, because just because something's glamorous doesn't mean that we should get involved, because there might be just a touch of sleaze and criminality and lowlife and the sort of the underside of society, things that we don't really need to get involved with. Yeah, it might sound fun, but actually the reality may not be so fun. Also on Wednesday, we have two conjunctions involving Saturn. Mercury makes a conjunction to Saturn, and so does the Sun. So you can see, beginning of a week, we had Mercury at 5 Pisces, Sun at 7 Pisces, Saturn at 9 Pisces. But Mercury is catching up on the Sun, and the Sun is moving towards Saturn, and so Wednesday sees this conjunction involving Sun, Mercury, and Saturn. It could be quite difficult. It may feel that we are blocked. Sun conjunct Saturn. I mean, Saturn is about restriction. It's about responsibility. There are things we'd like to do, but we can't do them. Mercury conjunct Saturn. Mercury, well, at worst, Mercury conjunct Saturn might be about feeling a bit negative. Just things aren't working. Feeling a bit depressed, but in a non-clinical sense. I must make that clear. Just feeling a bit down about it. But Mercury conjunct Saturn can actually be quite harsh. Can be about using words in quite a vicious way. So we need to be careful what we say, and if other people use harsh language, maybe we should be forgiving. Just say, well, Mercury's conjunct Saturn. It's difficult not to use harsh language with Mercury conjunct Saturn. And there's a reminder that the full moon at the end of the previous week was on the Mercury Saturn midpoint, and I think I said that this full moon is really about saying goodbyes. Saying goodbye to certain things, and Mercury conjunct Saturn also is about saying goodbye. This farewell theme does continue. A scene that has basically coming to an end, and it's like time to move on. Thursday, Friday, things are a bit easier. Thursday, Mercury makes a sextile to Jupiter. There's Mercury. It moves on, makes a sextile to Jupiter. Likewise, the Sun makes a sextile to Jupiter. So you've got Mercury and Jupiter coming together, making a sextile to Jupiter. So Thursday and Friday, I think there's a lot more optimism in the air. We feel that we can get things done, and the things we say are more positive, more optimistic, and if we think positively, I think that we can get a favourable response. Things do get easier towards the end of the week. Then right at the end of the week, over the weekend, we've got Mercury semi-square Pluto and Venus square Uranus. Mercury semi-square Pluto, perhaps it's not such a big deal. I suppose it's about intense thoughts, trying to be persuasive, because the Mercury-Pluto combination can be about propaganda. Maybe we'll be trying to influence someone to do something our way, or maybe someone will be trying to influence us to do things their way. That's how Mercury-Pluto might work. Although Pluto can silence things. So some of us might feel lost for words. Things are heavy and the words might not come out because we can't explain it. Or we feel that if we say something, we might be incriminating ourselves. Then we've got Venus square Uranus. It's an excitable energy, Venus square Uranus. Venus, planet of relationships, square Uranus. Things can suddenly happen, sudden meetings. In existing relationships, there could be a sudden change. Things are all going in one way, then suddenly something happens, and we have to suddenly reconsider the matter. So that's how Venus square Uranus might work. Now, slightly moving ahead to the week starting on March the 4th, there is a Jupiter semi-square Neptune aspect coming up. Okay, maybe not of immediate relevance, but I think we're starting to feel it already this week, Jupiter semi-square Neptune. We had Mars semi-square Neptune on Tuesday. On Monday, we had Venus semi-square Neptune. So both Venus and Mars at the beginning of this week, Monday the 26th, Wednesday the 28th, starting to trigger this Jupiter-Neptune square. Jupiter-Neptune semi-square. And, the Jupiter-Neptune semi-square, I mean, you can see there's Jupiter, there's Neptune, starting to make that 45-degree aspect. Jupiter square Neptune can be about optimism. It can be about fantasy. It can be about ideals. Trying to find a set of ideals in which we can sort of abandon ourselves to. We really want to believe in something. There's a lot of faith there. There's a lot of hope. But maybe it really is all fantasy. If we're going to have faith in something, okay, maybe we should be having faith in something. So it could have a religious nature, this Jupiter semi-square Neptune, a spiritual nature. At that level, it's probably fine. But if we are engaged in the sort of the mundane level, the material level of Jupiter semi-square Neptune, we could have unrealizable fantasies. So that is a possibility. I know that's more about the week after this week, but I think it is something to bear in mind. Okay, so now I just want to consider a few people who might be influenced by this week's events. Okay, there's one person who may be influenced by last week's events, and it's Prince Harry. So Prince Harry, I said that he had a full moon on, February the 24th. So that's last Saturday there's a full moon, and that full moon fell on his Mercury, because the moon was at 5 Virgo. And there's a question about what did that actually mean. I mean, Mercury is his communication planet, and I was thinking about his thoughts and what was it actually about. And I was looking at a video on YouTube, which is the reminder that there is an issue that Harry is currently having to deal with regarding his, I think his application for a US visa, maybe an immigration visa. And there is a question about whether or not he admitted to drug use or in his application, because they do ask questions. The Americans, they really they do have issues about taking drugs. They call it moral turpitude, and clearly they don't like you to. They don't want to have drug users or even previous drug users coming into their country, and they certainly don't want to have someone with a criminal conviction for drugs. I mean, not that Prince Harry has has a criminal conviction for that, obviously. But there is this question: did he lie on his application? And I think it's an organisation in America called the Heritage Foundation has made some kind of public records request. because they want to actually see Harry's application. What did he say? Because in his book Spare, he had admitted to taking drugs. So that contradicts, his application. If he hadn't come clean about taking drugs in his application for a visa, then potentially he's been lying, and potentially he should be deported. So maybe these are the kind of questions that Harry is having to deal with. Now, so far, the government, Homeland Security, has resisted this request. And I think there's a federal judge who has now said he wants to look at this thing, look at the application to make a decision about whether or not it should be released. I think this could be quite a big deal for Harry, because Harry is in kind of a bit of a difficult situation. Because if his application for the visa were to show that he did not, if it were to show that he had not owned up to taking drugs, then what does he do? I mean, he could say that, what he said in the book just simply wasn't true. He hadn't really taken drugs at all. I mean, I think he said in the book that he'd certainly taken marijuana and psychedelic mushrooms. But he could say, yeah, that's, it's just a book. It's not a sworn document, what he wrote in Spare. But in that case, he's not being truthful in his book. That discredits him. Or he could say, well, actually, yes, he did take drugs, in which case he's vulnerable to deportation. So maybe this full moon on Harry's Mercury is about this. Maybe this is quite a serious issue. Bearing in mind that Uranus is now at about 1920 Taurus. It's around his IC. The IC is his home, where he lives. I mean, I suppose Uranus on the IC would be a signature of deportation. Of course, Harry's not going to get deported, whatever happens. I mean, I think in America, once you're in the country, it's actually quite difficult to get you out of it. But one thing immigration don't like in the US is when you lie. I mean, they can deal with you potentially owning up to taking drugs, fair enough, but what they don't like is you lying about it. And so if it's shown that Harry has been lying, that could be problematic. And maybe this full moon on Harry's Mercury is about something happening in terms of this case. Perhaps that public record request, or however it's described, will be accepted, and maybe the Homeland Security will have to reveal and make public Harry's application for an immigration visa. So anyway, that's just a thought, just because I'm just trying to work out how that full moon is going to impact Harry, because it is right on his Mercury. And so, it could take a couple of weeks to work its way through. But that is something that Harry needs to consider. Maybe he's concerned about it. Then we've got George Bush Jr. Now, he is out of public life. I'm sure we'll know. We won't hear about it. But, this Sun, Mercury, Pluto conjunction in Virgo is right on George Bush Jr.'s Mars. I would guess that that's simply a question of him having to be careful. He's in his late 70s. He has to be careful how he goes. I'm sure he's very fit, but he must watch out, sort of climbing stairs, doing things which are safety critical. So I would have warned George Bush Jr. just to be careful in a sort of physical way, because it would be a shame if he would have fall over and break something. That's all I can think, because I mean he's out of public life. I don't think that there's any sort of scandal or anything about to hit him, but I think I think a bit of caution might be required on the part of George Bush Jr. Someone else is Keir Starmer. I did talk about Keir Starmer recently, and that he has actually had a lot of problems, Keir Starmer, or at least he's had a particular problem. I don't really know the full details, but it related to a big furore in the House of Commons about I think it was an issue about the Palestinians and what was going on in Palestine, and I think that Keir Starmer was accused of putting pressure on the Speaker of the House of Commons. If you're in the UK, I'm sure you know about this situation better than me. But the idea of the leader of the opposition putting pressure on the Speaker of the House of Commons, I think that Keir Starmer was saying that a lot of the Labour MPs were concerned about their safety, and so he was doing it for the sake of their safety. I'm not going to go into the details. As I said, you can look it up, but it has exposed him to criticism, and it's not actually going away, because Keir Starmer. There's Keir Starmer's horoscope. Actually, I don't know his time of birth, so let's not have an ascendant there. Let's just put it as 0 degrees Aries. So Keir Starmer has, you see, he's got a Sun-Pluto conjunction, and so in Virgo, and so this week there is a Sun, Saturn, Mercury conjunction at around 9:45 Pisces. So it's right opposition his Sun-Pluto conjunction. That could hit him in quite a major way. It's also on his Chiron, so he's got Saturn hitting his Chiron, and so I think it's likely that his leadership is going to be, he's going to be under a lot of pressure. Maybe it's about this incident with the Speaker of the House of Commons. Maybe it's just not going to go away. It may be something else. I'm not saying that he's not going to win the next election. I'm not saying he's suddenly going to disappear out of politics. I don't think it's that serious, but I think it could be, in the sort of, at least in the short term, fairly serious. Something that he really has to deal with that does take up a lot of his energy. And then there is Sam Bankman-Fried. I mean, it's not such a big deal. I kind of lose track of what's going on with Sam Bankman-Fried. I mean, he's not at liberty, is he? Has he been sentenced, or is he? I don't know. I get confused by this, but he's obviously, after this blow up with FTX and all that Bitcoin, that was people losing all their Bitcoin, and his. He's got his Jupiter. There's his Jupiter at 8 degrees Virgo, 8 degrees 56 Virgo. So at the moment, he's got Saturn conjunct his Jupiter. And I think this must be very difficult for him. And particularly this week when he's got the Sun and Saturn not conjunct, I mean opposition. So he's got the Sun, Mercury and Saturn opposition his Jupiter. He may feel that he may feel a lot of pressure. He may feel that he can't do what he wants to do. I suppose you can't do what you want to do in prison. I thought I'd just mention that. Now then it's Joe Biden. Now Joe Biden, I was thinking about Joe Biden, and Joe Biden has just said something like that Putin is something like, what did he say? Something like that Putin is some crazy son of a bitch or whatever. He said something like that. I mean, that's not a very professional thing to say if you're president of the United States and you're talking about another president, to say he's a crazy son of a bitch or words to that effect. What is it with Russia? I mean, what is it between Biden and Russia? I mean, I know we've had this Ukraine business, and Hunter Biden was involved in the Ukraine. I mean, what is the obsession about? And I suppose, Russia has just had this really quite important victory with its capture of this place Advika, I don't quite know how to pronounce it, this suburb of Donetsk, which is this fortress. It's kind of pretty much one of the most fortified places in Europe, and it was really supposed to hold on, and the Russians managed to capture it. It's of symbolic importance, and it perhaps undermines the entire Ukrainian line of defense. So it was not a trivial thing, Advika falling. It's more important than Bakhmut. So we've had this Russian victory, and then Biden is calling Putin a crazy son of a bitch. I mean, what's going on? Well, I think we need to think hard about when Joe Biden was born. Joe Biden was born on. There's Joe Biden's chart. Here's Joe Biden. He was born on November the 20th, 1942. Okay. He was born in the middle of the Second World War. Now, he was born actually the day after a very important event. He was born the day after Operation Uranus. So this is Operation Uranus was on November the 19th. So, it's like you imagine baby Joe about to be born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. What's going on in the world. I mean, he's going to be influenced by what's going on in the world, isn't he, baby Joe, just before he's born. So what actually was going on? So Operation Uranus. So this is a chart of Operation Uranus, November the 19th, 1942. At 7, I believe it was at 7:20 a.m. Actually, but that's set for Moscow. We should really reset it for Stalingrad. So this is when the 7:20 was a moment when the sort of the Soviet guns started blasting away, and they started their encirclement of the Sixth Army in Stalingrad. So it started the day before Joe Biden was born, and so this was the beginning of the turning of the Second World War in the Soviet Union's favour. And so it may be at some unconscious level, Joe Biden is kind of feeling this. He was born at the turning. Okay, I know that America was involved, on the Soviet Union's side, but it was particularly about the Soviet turning. And it may be that this battle of Advika is this. People realize this is a turning point. This is where now people are realizing that Russia is going to win this war. And he'd experienced this before, just when he was born, and so it's kind of coming around again. And how this relates to Joe Biden is about Saturn. So this Saturn Mercury Sun conjunction is at 9:45 Pisces. So he has it square his own Saturn. So in fact, it's square. Saturn is square the position of Saturn at the time of Operation Uranus, when at 7:20 a.m. And it was also square because Joe Biden was born at the same time, pretty much. Joe Biden has his Saturn at 9:57 Gemini. So this week, yes, he has his Saturn square Saturn. This is the final square before his third Saturn return. The third Saturn return happens just before your 90th birthday. So that will happen, when he hits his late 80s. And so when Saturn is square your Saturn, it's a moment of crisis. It's a moment of decision. It's a moment where you hit a block, and I think that this block perhaps may relate to Russia and what's going on in Russia, simply because of that Stalingrad link and the fact that he was born the day after Operation Uranus started. And also look at his chart. He's got Saturn in the seventh house. Saturn in the seventh house is the enemy. It's the other. And, he is the President of the United States. He's the king. Okay, some people may say, well, he's not a very effective king. Other people are making the decisions. I know there is that criticism, but he is, nominally at least, even if other people are making the decisions, he is the United States. He's the head of state. And the head of state has got Saturn square his Saturn. And he's got Mercury square his Saturn, and he's got Sun square his Saturn. So I think it is a difficult time for America. It's a difficult time for Biden. It is a moment of crisis, and it does represent perhaps America's enemies because the head of state has Saturn in his seventh, and Saturn is square his Saturn. Saturn in Pisces is squaring his Saturn in Gemini. So that is something to consider. Another leader who might be adversely impacted by this Saturn conjunct Sun and Mercury in Pisces is the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Viktor Orban, of course, has kind of stood out against European, the European Union's, Europe in general, its Russophobia, this sort of Russophobia which is sort of infecting Europe and wanting to sanctions against Europe. And Viktor Orban has questioned it. He said, what is the point? And I think as far as he's concerned, the Russian victory is pretty much inevitable. But he has Saturn square his Sun. He's a Gemini, born on May the 31st, 1963. So his Sun is at 922 Gemini. And so Saturn is square his Sun. This may be a difficult time for him because Saturn is not just square his Sun, but we've got Mercury is in Pisces is square his Sun, and the Sun in Pisces is square his Sun. So this could be a difficult time for him where he is actually under a lot of pressure. I'm not sure where this pressure is coming from. Okay, it's not just that. Remember, he's got Sun square Pluto. So that really makes it quite difficult. So he's got Sun, Saturn and Mercury's opposition his Pluto, square his Sun. So it's all about perhaps some kind of power struggle, not just about Hungary, but internationally. There are a lot of people in Europe who are trying to undermine Orban. European Union, they want him to go. I'm sure they'll do. They've already blackmailed Hungary into accepting this aid package for Ukraine, saying if you don't sign off on it, if you keep resisting it, we're going to destroy your economy. And so that kind of pressure is likely to continue. And maybe this Sun, Mercury, Saturn conjunction in Pisces is going to really hit Orban, and he's going to realize what he's up against. So it could be a difficult week for Viktor Orban. And then there is Admiral Sir Tony Radakin. So he is head of the British Armed Forces, basically. He is chief of the Defence Staff. So looking at his chart, I don't have a time of birth for him, but he is perhaps representative of the British Armed Forces, and the British Armed Forces are pretty overstretched at the moment. Um, or they perhaps don't admit it. I think the British Armed Forces, British from a military perspective, are pretty committed to Ukraine. I think they give Ukraine advice, left, right, and centre. They provide them with intelligence. They may or may not have operatives on the ground in Ukraine, special forces and so forth. I think the British were very, very, very anxious for this last year's supposed Ukrainian offensive, which was supposed to sort of rush through and take Melitopol maybe and take Crimea. Britain wants Crimea. Remember the Crimean War, 19th century? It seems that NATO really obsessed about Crimea. So this might have something to do with Ukraine, his perceptions about Radakin, and he probably thinks about Ukraine a lot. So what's going on in his chart? He has Mercury okay, this is noon chart. I don't know his time of birth. He's got Mercury at 10 Sagittarius, which is square Saturn at 10 Sagittarius. So he's got Mercury Saturn square. Now, obviously he's a clever man, must be. To get to the head of the armed forces, you've got to be pretty bright. But that Mercury in Sagittarius still is a bit of a problem, isn't it? Even though he's an admiral, Mercury in Sagittarius square Saturn. Maybe he can get the wrong ideas about things. I would have thought Mercury in Sagittarius, square Saturn, or maybe he's capable of being. Maybe there is a sense of realism. Perhaps there's also a sense of realism here, and so he has got his Saturn return. His Saturn return is coming up over the next week or two. So we've got British Chief of Defence Staff got his second Saturn return. And what is the second Saturn return about? Well, it's about seeing reality for what it is. This is the way it is. Okay, I mean, we know he's successful in his late 50s. Head of the Chief of the Defence Staff, done really well. But reality is starting to hit home. It might be something very personal. I mean, it doesn't matter how successful you are. I suppose everyone has to deal with their own mortality and thoughts about their own mortality. And I suppose late 50s can be a time when many of us are worrying about, starting to realize that we're not going to live forever. So that might be part of it. Might be something very private, nothing to do with his job. But I'm thinking, given given he is a public figure, I think that he's going to be facing reality here, and with his Saturn return square his Mercury, he's going to perhaps, in terms of looking at, for example, Ukraine, what's going on in Ukraine, and just realizing perhaps that the situation is hopeless for NATO, and that is possible. And of course that links with Joe Biden and what may be going on for Joe Biden. What are the feelings underneath? Yes, he called Putin a crazy son of a bitch, but maybe underneath for Biden is a realization with the fall of Advika that Russia is going to win, and perhaps Tony Radakin, with his Saturn return, is starting to have the same realization. So I wasn't really planning on spending so much time talking about Ukraine. I was just more talking about how people are responding to Ukraine. That was my sort of idea. But so there are a few people who might be sort of influenced by the whole thing. Viktor Orban getting some pushback from Europe about his attitude to Russia. Then we've got Joe Biden, born right after Stalingrad, born just out of the beginning of the start of a campaign, Operation Uranus, which would lead to a major Russian victory. unconsciously he knows which way it's going to go, perhaps having seen it as a just even before he was born, saw the start of it. And then of course we've got Tony Radakin with his Saturn return. Okay, so I am now going to look at the I Ching. So if you do not want your I Ching done, if you don't want it, you don't have to have it. You don't need to be part of this forecast. So you can just stop watching this video and look at something else, or maybe have a break from the internet. Yeah, that is a possibility. So here goes. So I asked the question. What is the week going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this YouTube video? So I threw 3 coins in the air 6 times, and I got this hexagram. Hexagram 64. There are 64 hexagrams. So this is the last hexagram. And it represents before completion. We haven't finished. And the symbolism here is a fox trying to cross a river. And it's a small fox. And it's tough. And the fox has to be really careful. In particular, the fox must not get its tail wet. That's what the I Ching says. Because if the fox gets its tail wet, it gets dragged down by the weight. So we have to be really careful, and we must not make mistakes because we haven't reached the other side yet. So what are we involved in? But something that hasn't finished yet. It's a dangerous situation. And the bottom line moves. So the bottom line of before completion, the bottom three lines represent the abyss. They're very watery, the abyss. These bottom line, second from the bottom, third from the bottom, the abyss. And it transforms into the lake. So it's more water. And what happens when the bottom line moves? The suggestion is actually the fox does get its tail wet and starts getting dragged down. So we may be in a situation where we need to sort of back off immediately, just straight away. We may be in a dangerous situation where we really can't see it through. And so perhaps at the very beginning we can stop, because if we carry on, we may actually find that we've actually taken on too much. And that does put us in a difficult position. And then we have to consider what before completion moves to. And it moves to this, which is hexagram 38, which is opposition. So it's another difficult hexagram. And so, this week, we start with a difficult project that may actually be impossible to complete. And then if we plow on, we run into opposition. We find that we get very little support. We may feel that we're just separated from the people who should be supporting us. And yes, in the end, we don't get anywhere. Yeah, I know that sounds negative, doesn't it? But I think, the positive there is at least we know there's a problem. And so I think we do have to be really careful this week. And so, we have to think about how we start the week. we need to start the week with a complete understanding of our weaknesses and vulnerability, and realize that if we get involved in something, it might not have a good ending. We just don't have the resources. Um, and in the end, if we plow through with it, we're not going to get any help. We're not going to get any support. We may even fall out with people. May not be our fault, but that's the way it is. So that's the general picture. So let's now look at this from the perspective of money, and well, it's a kind of a similar picture, isn't it? Now, I should say that this is for entertainment only. I'm not here to give financial advice, but if we're planning on spending money, we think we might want to spend money to achieve a particular aim. It's possible that we quickly start to lose control of the situation. We might find that we've taken on too much. So if you are planning on spending a lot of money this week, perhaps in support of a project or something, you might quickly realize that it's not going to work out. You may quickly realize that you've wasted a lot of money because things just weren't properly configured. There's one mistake. You just didn't have the resources. Maybe it required you to spend a lot of money, but you didn't have a lot of money, and you just didn't have the resources, and it just didn't work out. And before you know it, it feels as if you're involved in a situation that may feel, I won't say disastrous, but is certainly not fortunate, and there may be a lot of regret. You can't go forward, you can't go back. So if you've made financial commitments, or you've made promises to people about money, that you're going to do something this week, I would suggest you back out, maybe, or you consider backing out. Because if you really think about it and you really kind of try to think it through, then you might start to say, well, hold on, how is this? Is this really going to work? So sometimes it's best to just stop right at the beginning. You might feel that you're letting people down, you're embarrassing yourself, but no, it's better that way than to sort of start to cross the river and then halfway through realize there's a problem. And that leads, before completion, leads to opposition. So if you're trying, again, if you're trying to achieve something, if you're trying to get money from people, you might not have much leverage, and so perhaps if we were seeing this hexagram, you perhaps had an idea to make more money or to get more money. You had this idea at the beginning of a week, and you started, and it's just not working out. You try to fix the thing, you try to sort the thing out, and it just doesn't work out. And in the end, you're you don't get any support, and it just doesn't happen. So it may just be a question of delaying it, just putting some of your ideas, particularly in a financial sense, just putting them on hold, getting more information. I think that would probably be a good idea. Okay, let's now consider career and work, business, etc. So it's not surprising that if you're trying to achieve something, if you're at work, if you're working in a job, you're trying to do something, you thought you're going to do something, you're trying to do something this week, there's a real chance that you're being over ambitious. You thought something was possible, and soon enough you'll realize that it's not possible. Perhaps you promised your employer you'll do something by a particular date, maybe by Friday, in which case you've been overambitious. You've overpromised, and if you take on too much, you will quickly, you will quickly run into trouble, and that could compromise you. So do not attempt. Okay, I may be wrong, all things being equal, but remember this. What I'm saying is for entertainment purposes only. Consider not attempting big things, as the I Ching would say, like crossing the great water, like crossing a river, because if you do, halfway through the river, you might find yourself being dragged down. It's all too much. So take it easy at work. Don't be tempted to initiate big things. If you're self-employed, don't be tempted to expand. This week, perhaps you haven't done enough research. You haven't got enough support. You haven't talked to enough people, and you just need to pause, not try and cross that river right now. And if you started to cross the river, maybe it's not too late to back off, because you haven't got what it takes, I don't think, to get to the other side. And when you are trying to make sense of whatever situation you're in, when things start to go wrong, you may find that you're on your own. No one's going to help, perhaps. Opposition. You may attract criticism. You may feel that you're really far away from the people who could help you. So it might be heroic what you've done, but being heroic on its own doesn't really count for much, particularly if you're failing. So overall, whatever your situation, I would say don't take risks. Don't try to do big things. Not this week. I think you might have been planning on doing big things, but maybe not. But I don't want to sort of say you shouldn't try to take advantage of opportunities that come your way. Sometimes you have to try to take advantage of opportunities, but just bear in mind that it may be difficult. If you've got it, you just shouldn't take risks. If there's a risk, you should really avoid it. If something can go wrong, it possibly will go wrong. Yeah, that's this week. I'd love to be more positive, but that's what the I Ching is saying. And finally, there is relationships. I suppose this week. Remember this week. If you go back to what I was saying at the beginning of this video, there's a Sun-Saturn conjunction today. This week. There's a Mercury-Saturn conjunction this week. Saturn restricts. With Saturn, we can't really express ourselves. And then it's kind of a similar situation here with the I Ching before completion. Maybe we've got some ideas about relationships. Maybe we were trying to get close to someone. Maybe if we're involved in a relationship, we're trying to sort things out. We're trying to mend fences. But it's not going to work. Or at least I don't think it's going to work. And there's absolutely plenty of scope for disappointment. And if you get really close to someone, you may actually feel they're dragging you down. You get too close to someone, they're just, they are not helpful, not constructive. They may grind you to a standstill, and the whole situation could be overwhelming and pretty destructive. So possibly this week you should avoid close one-to-one relationships, and perhaps you shouldn't start big journeys in another person's company, because if you're on your own, you're in control. But with another person, that person could bring you down. Maybe you'll have to deal with the fundamental nature of someone's personality. I'm thinking of that. What's that fable? The fable of the frog crossing the river, and there's a flood. And the scorpion, there's a scorpion that's stranded, and the scorpion says to the frog, I'm stranded. Can you help me cross the river? And then the frog says, no, I won't, because you'll sting me if I do that. And the scorpion says, I promise I won't. And then the frog starts crossing the river, and the scorpion stings the frog, and the frog says, why did you do that? Because you've just killed me, and we're all going to drown. And then the scorpion says, well, yeah, but it's my nature. So maybe it's that kind of situation with other people. People have their nature. You can't help it. They can't help it. And so if you get too close to someone, you start to see their fundamental nature. And halfway across the river, I'm not saying it's going to sting you, but you'll just realize who you're lumbered with. And people could drag you down. So I think you need to respect your independence, and I think you need to be very aware of other people's capacity to cause a lot of damage. And this before completion, it does move to a different hexagram to opposition. Greg Winkup calls this hexagram estrangement. Maybe the estrangement comes about because you make the decision that you're going to play safe. If you don't trust other people, then you won't get get sort of much positivity from them, because you'll be estranged from them. But I suppose it's better to be estranged from people, to be opposite people, from to have them really close to you, so close they drag you down. So maybe there's a silver lining to that. Estrangement, is perhaps the way to go. When you're opposed to people, at least you're not with them. Or you could just say, well, if you do try to achieve big things with other people, then in the end, it's going to lead to acrimony, which is another reason why we should stick to our own resources and be as independent as possible. Okay, so I'm my apologies for being so negative, but all I'm doing is I'm just reporting what the I Ching says, and it's just for a week, and of course there is a possibility it means nothing. I may be wrong. Bear that in mind. And I'm not predicting disaster. I'm just suggesting overall that with this I Ching that you should avoid attempting big tasks, regardless of what your priority is. Because if you attempt something that's too big, you may not be able to see it through, and it may be better to just back off and wait for the situation to resolve. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this video useful. If you did find it useful, I would be grateful if you were to press the like button. If you're not subscribed, and you've reached this stage, this end of this video, and you found it useful, yeah, I'd be grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.